Hey everybody, Christopher here.
Hey guys, Noah here.
If you watched last week's show, all I have to say is get ready for another really interesting topic that I think could go 3,000 different directions that I think has the potential to leave a lot of room for some really great questions, comments, and further discussion. Even just sitting here beforehand, as the two of us have been going back and forth and talking about some different things, we're already going some different directions and running into some brick walls. This should be very interesting. Why don't you go ahead and tell everybody what we're talking about tonight?
Yeah, so what we are going to be talking about is essentially past lives, but even in to kind of summarize it a little bit more, is just the idea of reincarnation as a whole, which is going to be like last week. It's a little bit more of a controversial topic when it comes to the paranormal community and stuff like that. But based off of the findings and research that Christopher and I have done, Um, it's a thing that we both very much believe in, but the way that we view reincarnation and perhaps how the universe works as a whole is almost an unorthodox way of looking at it sometimes because basically to kind of sum it up and understand how my crazy mind works is that I try to take pieces from pretty much any religion or anything that anybody talks about as far as like the Egyptians, the Nordics, Buddhism, Judaism, the Roman Catholic Church, Christianity, like all of that. I try to take pieces from everything that everybody is saying because I almost view that like the universe is a giant puzzle. It's just one big puzzle, and we're trying to solve that puzzle to understand all of the inner workings behind the universe. And I feel like rather than looking at one particular religion and sticking to it, it's more of I try to take pieces from every single one to kind of like come up with what are the things that are lining up and matching and making sense, and what are the differences, and maybe why do they make sense versus something that somebody else is saying, and basically just trying to determine based off of everything that I've researched, everything that I'm finding out in the actual field of paranormal investigating, what are the pieces that make sense from every different religion or topic or thing that we're talking about, and how does it fit into solving the overall puzzle of the universe. And that's where it's kind of like reincarnation is very much a big piece of that, but how does it work, why does it work, it's such a deep conversation and thought process that this is probably even one of those topics that we're going to try to get through as much as we can today while making it make sense. But at the same time, we're probably going to have to revisit it from time to time because it is such a deep belief system and how it works and all the different avenues that it goes. It's like it can go a million different ways, to be honest.
Well, even just what we were looking at before we started, just seeing within one particular belief system and one particular tradition, there appear to be contrasts and things that are contradictory to each other within that one belief system. There's just so much.
Right, and for me, so what you're referencing is the Egyptian side of reincarnation. And it was one of those ones that after all these years that I've really been fascinated with the Egyptian culture and uh, their uh, their whole religious system and how everything works. I've always been super fascinated, and it's kind of like one of those things where I feel like I know a lot about how that stuff works. But I guess whenever we were kind of getting on here and getting ready to start, and I'm looking at stuff, I didn't quite realize how complicated some of the different topics in the Egyptian culture are, and essentially how they kind of negate some of their own belief systems. So it's like I don't know, and we'll kind of dive into it a little bit to give a little bit of background in understanding that. But I'm almost now even looking at it is it that is it kind of like the Christian religion where it all kind of started with one particular religion, and like, and then it just kind of created this huge tree with branches that essentially, like, there's now all these different specific religions. Like you have like first Christian, first Baptist, I could go on and on with all the different denominations of the Christian belief system. But they all, while there's a lot of things that they agree with, they also have a lot of differences in things that they talk about. So it's like, is the Egyptian culture just that same sort of thing? Like, is there just different belief systems that kind of branched off from the original source?
Or even another thought that occurred to me is what we were looking at, potentially just the evolution of their belief system and how their belief system changed over time, even though it wasn't written clearly that way, that's what we were looking at. I have to wonder if that wasn't evolving as time went on from one to the
Right.
next.
Right. And another thing to think about and keep in our heads is the fact that the same way that the Christian church kind of really derived from the Bible, and obviously it wasn't written in English. It was written in a dialect that people don't even speak anymore. And so as time has like went on, everybody has basically tried to interpret, and they've tried to make their essentially interpretation of it. And um, that's where it's like, are there things that are being misinterpreted or misread, or, and you see what I'm saying? Like, and so there's also that, because like where the Christian church has the Bible, the Egyptians, and what I'm finding is one of two things. And you could argue that they actually come from the same thing essentially, but there are the ancient tablets that were written by the Atlanteans, one being Thoth the Atlantean, who was kind of like the god of knowledge and stuff like that. And so they derive a lot of information from those specific texts. But at the same time, they also have all of their hieroglyphics on all of their stuff that seem to point to the possibility that they were actually being handed down information from the gods, which kind of gets into the conversation that there's been a lot of belief that the beings that they saw as their gods were actually extraterrestrials that came to Earth and passed on their knowledge to them and assisted them in building all of the structures that they have, like the pyramids, for instance. Because the crazy thing about the pyramids and stuff like that, the way in which that they were built, we can't even replicate that in today's technology, or the technology that we're told that we have, essentially.
Right. It almost makes me wonder if the ancient Egyptians are sitting there and looking down on what we were reading before this and like, no, none of that's right. It's all wrong.
I can 100% see that as a thing.
Right.
And right, there's so many different avenues that, like, for instance, like an example as like why it gets like so confusing is because whenever you hear the word reincarnation, the immediate thing that you think of is this idea that, like, when I die, my soul, instead of moving on into what you would consider an afterlife, just essentially is reborn into a new body. And it's like a big cycle of things, right?
Mhm.
The Egyptians, while I've definitely heard of that, and that's why I get confused with it, I've definitely heard of that, but I also know that the Egyptians talk about reincarnation more in the sense of when you die, you go to the underworld and you're led by Anubis. The Egyptians, like, whenever they, were talking about reincarnation, there was, you know, the way in which reincarnation is more, I think, generally believed, in the sense of, like, whenever I die, my soul, rather than moving on to an afterlife, just gets reborn in a new body. But they also talked about this idea that whenever somebody would die, their body would go to the underworld, and they'd be led by Anubis to essentially the temple of Osiris, and Osiris would then judge them, and based off of, if Osiris would deem you worthy, you would then move on to the afterlife, which they called the field of reeds. And if he judged you that you weren't worthy, you actually just ceased to exist. It's
Right.
like you never existed. So that's where, like, as I was sitting here before we actually started this, I'm sitting there like, well, wait a second. I've heard both of those in the Egyptian, and really the second one that I described, to me, doesn't even mean reincarnation. That's actually just as similar as the Christian belief system and how that works. Essentially, you die and then you go to an afterlife. Now, depending on the denomination of it, there might be what you would consider purgatory, which you could argue is the time that, like, as you're being led through the underworld by Anubis before you're judged, you could look at that as purgatory, the same that some denominations of the Christian belief system works, depending on the denomination of it. And so that's where it's like, so that one actually to me isn't even reincarnation at all. That's more
Right.
of just the standard how belief system and how that works. But I made the comment before we started. The more and more that I'm looking at how the Egyptians viewed stuff, I have to ask the question whether is it what you said, in the sense of it's just been passed down so many times that looking at it now, there's so many difference of opinions on what they believed or how they believed it to work.
Right.
Or is it just simply that the Egyptians didn't know what the fuck was going on and they just kind of threw up any idea and said, oh, that's possible?
Right. So it just evolved over time. And I mean, maybe people just adopted as their own personal belief system what felt right in the moment. And a number of those ended up being widely accepted and are all being called reincarnation based on what we just looked at. I
Right.
feel like there's still some misuse of the word there in what we were looking at.
Right. And there is a portion of reincarnation in the Egyptian that does kind of work the same way, but in a different way. So I know that you've heard of the halls of Amenti,
Right.
but I'm going to kind of explain it in the best way that I can, for those that maybe have never heard of the halls of Amenti. The halls of Amenti were essentially a a giant tomb, essentially, under the Pyramid of Giza. And what they believed was that, whether you believe it was a machine that was given to them by extraterrestrials or the gods or something, they believed that they had a machine in the halls of Amenti, under the Pyramid of Giza, that had the ability to transfer consciousness. And this wasn't something that, like, was for everybody. This was basically, if you weren't a pharaoh or someone of great high importance, you didn't even know the halls of Amenti existed. They didn't talk about this. This was like a very hush hush thing between, like, the most powerful people of Egypt and stuff like that. But where you can find a lot of information about the halls of Amenti is the emerald tablets of Thoth the Atlantean. So if that's something that you're really interested in diving down, and I highly recommend it because it is very interesting stuff. Whether you believe it or not, I think it's just an interesting read on how they viewed things and stuff like that. So check that out if that's something you're interested in. But um, essentially, they believed that this machine could transfer consciousness. So they also believed, kind of similar to Hinduism, in the sense of, like, you can actually gain higher levels of spirituality to gain spiritual enlightenment. The Egyptians believed that you could reach a level of spiritual enlightenment that typically when you reincarnate, it's said that you basically forget everything about your previous lives. Like it's just kind of like a clean slate in the sense of you don't remember anything. And that's why it's such a hard thing to even prove, because if we just came back with all our memories, we would all know, but nobody does. But they believe that you could reach a level of spirituality in which that you retain all of your memories. So you remember everything about every life that you've ever lived. And essentially what they thought was that if a pharaoh reached this level of reincarnation, or this level of spirituality, when he reincarnates into his new body, he would remember all the stuff of his past lives, and then they could take him down to the halls of Amenti and essentially transfer his consciousness from his new body back into his old body. And that's actually why they mummified people. Like that was actually the entire reason why they did it. And it also is why they only mummified like the pharaohs and stuff. Like they didn't just mummify like random people. Like they just kind of let them die. They didn't care. The only things that were mummified were like the pharaohs and some of their, like if they had a wife, they would mummify their wife. If they had a cat, they would mummify that. Like anything that was particular to them, they would mummify those things. So then whenever they would essentially be brought down to the halls of Amenti in their new body, they could transfer the consciousness back into the old mummified body. And that's essentially how they believed they unlocked the idea of immortality. Not through the sense of like your physical body never technically dies, but in the sense of you can essentially control reincarnation. You can control it.
Right. What of that makes the most sense to you? I mean, what of that hits you on the most personal level of anything that we've said so far? Like, yeah, I can grab onto that.
This is gonna sound so crazy, but all of it in a sense.
That
In a
doesn't sound
sense.
that crazy.
All of it in a sense. So to kind of understand what my general belief system is, I believe that reincarnation is 100% a thing. Obviously, we're diving down possible past lives that we've lived and stuff like that. I 100% the reincarnation is a thing. However, I also do believe that there is a higher plane of existence, or you can call it an afterlife. But how I think you get there isn't just generic, I die and then I immediately get judged and go there. You get judged, but it's more of in a sense of like, I believe that you essentially earn your way to the higher plane of existence through reaching higher levels of spirituality. And I essentially, it's kind of like one of that basically the idea that like once you've reached a level of spirituality that you're no longer actually able to exist in the mortal realm. Like at that point, your spirit has become so powerful and so enlightened that you physically can't live here. So therefore, now you have earned the right to then go to the higher plane of existence. And to kind of tie that into what we talked about last week, because we talked about third and fourth dimension.
Right.
And now I'm going to throw out the fifth dimension. And I believe the fifth dimension is that. So technically, even the fourth dimension where the spirits that basically take up the same space as us on a different realm, they aren't even in the higher plane of existence. They're not allowed there until they do whatever or finish, or you know what I mean?
Right.
Something of that nature. Um, so so basically, yeah. So it's like I believe in an afterlife system, but I also believe in reincarnation, and it's essentially basically like all of your lives that you live is a cycle, in the sense of you're trying to progress, and each life you're essentially trying to boost your level of spirituality until the point that you have become a being of such spiritual enlightenment that you can no longer exist in the physical realm. So that's where you've basically earned the right to ascend and go to the higher plane of existence. And there's also the opposite, where you can regress. And I think it's almost kind of like built on karma in a way, in the sense of like, the more and more that you do that's good, and not even necessarily in the mortal way that we say good. It's almost kind of like, if you think about, like, because we talk a lot about balance, right? Good and evil both exist in the world, right?
Right.
And it's kind of like this idea that, like, the universe is kind of like a mutual thing. The universe is both good and bad. So we can't look at that as like, how you make it to the next phase, or basically ascend into the higher plane of existence, is necessarily in the mortal way that we look at good and bad. But I almost look at it as, if you're through your lives becoming more and more at one or beneficial to the overall universe, then you ascend. But if you are constantly trying to screw things up and tear down the universe, that's where you descend, to a point where these beings that we know as like demons and stuff like that, they're no longer human. Maybe at one time they was, or they were something. Because obviously, as we can talk about extraterrestrials, the same way that an extraterrestrial, like the same way that we would have a soul, so would an extraterrestrial. So you can talk about, like, maybe there's spirits that we communicate that aren't actually human, but they were just an extraterrestrial spirit. That's a whole topic in itself as well. But maybe some of these entities that we come across that aren't human are literally this idea of, they have been twisted in so many times, in so many ways, that they're no longer even human, you know? Like, they've done such horrible things that they no longer even contain any sort of humanity. They're just pure evil, in a sense, maybe.
Right.
What do you think?
The thought sitting with me in this immediate moment is, how many people in history do you think have said and were completely convinced that in a past life they were like Marie Antoinette? Let's throw a name out there. I mean, you see that all the time, that people think they were one particular historical person. How many
Right.
people could possibly be that one historical person? So happily, I will say that on my past life journey, I've not yet connected to a historical person. I'm really glad. It would just make me really uncomfortable.
Right. And you're 100% right, man. It's kind of like, but I also kind of take that as, that's also, everybody wants to be the the main character of the movie,
Right.
if that makes any sort of sense. Like everybody wants to be that main character. So therefore, they hear about a really famous historical person that maybe they like, or they resonate with, and they're just instantly like, "Oh, I bet I was them." And it's like, do you understand that the likelihood of that is like so far fetched? Like, we all can't be the same person. Like, like so I 100% understand what you say by that.
Yeah, I'm happy I've never gone there. But I mean, as anybody who knows me knows, I do 100% believe in reincarnation. As both a pagan and a witch, that's something that is very dear to my belief system. Having done work not only for myself, but having done work for other people, helping them to uncover their past lives through hypnosis regressions. I mean, I've seen people come up with some incredible things. I've seen people in a hypnosis regression, they start talking to me once they're in, and just in front of me, they're not the same person. Their mannerisms are different when they speak. Their voice is different. There's absolutely something to it. I've seen enough that there's no way I couldn't believe in it. And I mean, even for me, the work that I've done, I have 3 past lifetimes that stick out so strongly. I mean, one going back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years.
Right.
Another one is as recent as the 1900s. I don't even think I've told you about that one. Someday I'll tell you that story.
I think it's kind of like one of those things where there's a possibility of so many lifetimes. You know,
right?
Kind of you could have like, and that actually kind of gets us into this idea of like, well, some people might wonder, like, it's like, well, how do you know whether somebody has had a lot of lifetimes or maybe they've only lived once or twice? And honestly, I think the easiest way to maybe say this, again, this is all hypothetical, but let's take somebody that seems to be, I don't even want to say the word smart because that's not the right way to say this, but we're going to say wise. Like, just very wise in the way that they look at things, or they're very open-minded of things and stuff like that. And that could be a potential sign that somebody has lived a lot of lives. They're very wise because they've seen a lot, right? They may not know that they've seen a lot, but their soul has. And also unlocking, I think unlocking levels of the spirit is also then going to open up actually remembering past lives. That's a thing to keep in mind as well. But then I think on the opposite side of that, again, not saying that, like, you know, someone with a lack of intelligence, but more of if somebody's really just naive, like they like say you have somebody that is just like, somebody says something and they're always instantly going to trust that person or something like that, when it's kind of like, and everybody else might be saying like, oh well, I don't think that is the thing. They're just being very unwise in how they move about their lives. You could say possibly like, I feel like this is a soul that hasn't lived a lot of lives because they're still kind of learning,
Right.
in a sense of like, in the idea of that. So that's a thread to pull on as well.
I feel like I've been one of those that's just been going around and around and around and accumulating. I mean, I've done this lots and lots of times. I feel like just through the spiritual work that I do, there's no way I accumulated all of that just in this one lifetime. There's no way.
We could even say there's the possibility that stuff like psychic mediums
Right.
are a sign that somebody has lived a lot. Like, basically we could say like, the people that have lived the most lives have more abilities, and
Right.
that's kind of a spectrum. So therefore, in that idea, it's kind of like me being kind of in the medium. It's kind of like, oh, I could have possibly lived a good bit of lives, you know, in a sense of like, I'm still developing my abilities and stuff like that, but I haven't lived as many as you because you contain more abilities. And then for the people that don't have any abilities, we could say that maybe that's a new soul. Not saying that that's what it is, but that's just a possibility. Like, I have to look at that as a possibility of a sign, because when we're talking about this, anything is possible.
Another direction I want to take that, when you talk about someone who might not have any psychic ability or any other type of spiritual ability in that sense, what if they have lived before and something happened where they just shut it down? I've encountered things like that in past life regressions. Somebody wants to know why they're blocked, why they can't do something. They feel they should be able to, but they can't. And then we encounter something that happened. It's like, oh, this shut this
That's
down.
a good point. That's 1000% a great point to bring up, because that's true. I mean, we have come across stuff like that, and that could be a sign there too that, yeah, well, maybe that person still has, even though they don't contain any abilities. It's like, oh no, they have them, they're just blocked. So yeah, I like that. That's also another reason. So that's why I say too is like, that's why you can't look at this as like, it's not 100% factual. It's just I'm taking what I'm thinking and I'm trying to explain it the best way that I can, because I don't know, not for certain. But another thing too that I kind of theorize about with this whole thing is like, you know how everybody's just like super fascinated with like certain eras or stuff. I
Right.
feel like that could be a sign that that was like a past life, because like for me, just an example of one that like, that to me not proves my theory, but it moves me in the direction of it being a possibility, is the sense of one of the eras that I was always super fascinated with was like the Old West. I love
Right.
cowboys, I love stuff like that. And that's something that I won't really dive too much into it, in the sense of that's something that is coming up in a movie very soon that we get into. But um we basically understand that one of my possible past lives was from that time era. You know, I was in the Old West. So that's where I'm kind of like, ooh, that was cool, because that was one of like I love the Old West. So I start to think of like all these different eras that I am really fascinated with, and I love the stuff from there. Is that kind of like a sign that that was different eras that I lived in? And the same
Right.
can go for anybody, any era that they're super, or even just stuff. Like I know one guy that I actually work with, I have talked to before, and he kind of agrees with what we're talking about, because I've had these conversations with him. And one of the ones that he's super fascinated with is the samurai from
Mhm.
Japanese culture. So that's where I'm kind of like, yeah, I feel like it's possible. Who am I to say that it's not possible?
Right. For me, I've never really stepped into something that's so much connected to an era. Rather, I mentioned a little while ago another life that I've started to uncover that I haven't even told you about. It's more connected to a building,
Right.
just a building that just like captured my heart from the very beginning. And over time, started getting these bits and pieces like, oh, okay, I've been here before. That's why.
That makes sense.
And I
Right.
mean, of course, there's other things that were just never really on my radar. I mean, I never really spent that much time thinking about the Civil War before I landed in my Civil War past life. And now that's become a huge part of who I am.
Right. And that actually even then brings up the idea too, like of what you just said. Like, say you go somewhere and you just instantly like the place. There's also kind of like going back a few episodes where we were talking about the deja vu stuff. So like, what if you have a dream about somewhere, or you show up in a place and all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, I feel like I've seen this place before. And then you do some past life work and it actually turns out that, oh, the reason I recognize it, or I like it, or I've seen it, whatever. It's like because that's a life that you lived.
Right. You have no idea the door you just opened for my thinking. And I am absolutely going to hang on to this for right now because this involves somebody else. It involves another person. I'm not going to name drop them right now, but it goes back to a conversation that happened a few years ago that made absolutely no sense to me in the moment. Like I looked at them like they were crazy when they said what they said, but that just gave me entirely new context to it. Maybe it's not so crazy. Oh, you just opened
Oh,
something.
oh, that's what I do. That's what I mean, and
Whoa.
that's
There's
what's
only
interesting.
one place this is going to lead. This is going to lead to me like telling someone, I insist you have to do a past life regression. And if they say no, I'll make them. I won't make them, but I have to know.
Right? And that's what's interesting about this topic. I feel like that's what's interesting about this whole topic, or even just realm of stuff, is just the fact that like the more and more we talk about it, we're constantly evolving our belief system or how we view things, because I like to take everything with a grain of salt, and I like to do my own research into it, and it's
Right.
kind of like, as things like that, you look at things that happen, and while at the moment it may not have made sense, something years down the road, or whenever it happens, could like bring you back to that moment. You're like, oh, now that makes sense.
Right. Right. And even with the whole idea of a particular era, again, this isn't an era, and this is not something I've had any chance to explore. I have no idea where this fits in. But every time I cross the border into West Virginia, I feel like I'm at home.
Well, it also could just be, take me home.
Right. Well, it does feel like home.
Because
Nice.
that's a great song.
That is a great song.
Every time I hear that song, I also feel like I'm from West Virginia.
I mean, every time I drive over that state line, I just feel so completely at peace.
There's a there's an energy to West Virginia. Not to get super off topic here, but yes, like there's an energy about West Virginia that to me is different. And for me, I can really say that in the sense of like I being that I live like right essentially on the Ohio River, and I pass over into West Virginia like a lot. I go there a lot. There's an energy to West Virginia, and the thought that pops into my mind as to why that is the Appalachian Mountains. I
Right.
haven't had a lot of time to dive into that. That is a project that I want to work into. Is essentially that that whole topic, which I definitely want to make a project about at some point in time. But I agree with what you're saying here.
Yeah, I don't know. It's of all the places I've been, that's just one place that I don't know, it feels like home.
Right.
I'll figure it out.
Or or we'll at least dive into it.
Right.
Right. We may not understand it at the time, but we'll dive into it.
Right. And I mean, even the past life I mentioned that I haven't really told you about. I mean, who knows? Maybe that life started in West Virginia. I don't know. I'll dig at it. It's been on my mind for a while.
We also have this idea too, though, that like if like that whenever you live a life, and like say as you're living, if there's ever people that pop into your life that seem to have great importance, or the way that you met them is such a weird way, but everything kind of fits so perfectly, is this idea that like you've lived a life with them before, like you have some sort of connection to them even in past lives. And
Right.
that's something that we have been diving down, in the sense of we have theories about past lives that we may have been involved at some capacity, whether it be friends, you know what I mean, friends, or the the Civil War one that we've been kind of diving down, where we believe we just were on the same side, possibly, like stuff like that. It's interesting, because the way that Crooked Path started and the way that we met, and it was such a weird way that it happened, and everything kind of progressed from there. But it like the more and more we got into it, it was very much like we're not even doing this. There's something of a higher power that's pulling the strings, saying, "Hey, you guys are meant to work together. You're supposed to do this journey together." Like that, you know what I mean? Like there was something there. So I have to throw that out there too. Is that like is that is that a higher plane of existence type thing?
Right. Maybe. There's definitely something behind it.
Right.
I just changed how I was going to word that. I was going to say something else and then something behind it. Interesting. I pulled something right back, and that's what came.
Right. So
I didn't even realize until now that this all happened. My God.
mhm.
Ah, I don't know if I feel like explaining this or not.
I feel like we should hold on to that one for right now.
Yeah, it's one of those if you know, you know.
If you know, if you know, you know. Kind of like to the morgue.
To the morgue.
Which that is 100% going to be a T-shirt.
Yeah, people are asking for it already.
I know, and that's why like I'm really excited. This weekend we should have that up and running. We should have
Right.
that able to go. So if you want your Crooked Path merch, stay tuned after this weekend. It should be up and running, so you can grab your clothing items.
Absolutely.
I think it's pretty cool.
I feel like with what we've been talking about, we just barely scratched the surface. I feel like we just did so much, and there's still so many layers to this.
There are. I mean, there's definitely always going to be layers and layers when it comes to this topic, but I feel like even with what we're doing, this is why this is probably going to be one of those topics that we dive down more than once because A, there's just so many different levels to it, but B, as we're kind of working on things in our own research, that's where we might come back and say, hey, so this is what I've gotten since the last time we talked about it, and this is kind of where I'm at now. But yeah, I feel like this is going to be something that we that we come back and talk about multiple times.
Right.
Is there anything that for today's that is there anything else that you feel you need to say about the topic?
Not really. I mean, I know there are some belief systems that believe you can even reincarnate as an animal or an
Right.
inanimate object.
That is well, right. So I've heard that. Me personally, I believe more in the sense of you can return as an animal, not an inanimate object, and the reason being is because I feel personally that in order to reincarnate, it has to be of something that can have a soul.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, I'm not going to say anybody's wrong in that belief, but that
no,
doesn't fit
no,
for me at all. That doesn't
right,
feel right for me. That's not a part of my belief
right,
system.
right. I do
An
not want to,
animal, I can
yeah,
feel that.
right. Yeah, I do not at all want to make it sound like I'm saying you're wrong. It's just that it's just not how I personally believe it. But I could be wrong. I could be 100% wrong in that. But yeah, I just personally feel it has to be something that has a soul. And like for instance, for me, it's like I've grown up with having pets my entire life.
Right.
Predominantly dogs, because I'm more of a dog person than a cat person. Don't come at me for that. But I'm more of a dog person. But with that being said, is that with the amount of dogs that I've had throughout my life, and I still have two right now that sometimes I think people can see in the background as they're laying very lazy like on my couch, but they have all had their own personalities. Like no one dog or cat is the same. You know what I mean? They all
Right.
have their way of doing things. They have their own personalities, and that's where I'm kind of like, yeah, like I feel like they are. I don't want to necessarily say like obviously like they may not be as intelligent as we are, and maybe that's back to this idea that like back a few episodes ago when we were talking about the whole thing with like the brain being the computer and how your spirit or your soul can process everything during that current life, and
Right.
obviously with animals not having a brain that is quite unlocked as a human's is, maybe that's why it's different. But you can obviously tell that like they're intelligent, they know what they're doing and they know what you're doing and stuff like that, and they have their own personalities. So me, they have to have a soul.
Right.
And then it's and yeah, so I have 1000% agree with that. But yeah, for me personally, it's like I'm not saying it's not possible that you can't die and then also like I can't be a pillow, but I just don't personally believe that. I feel like whatever it is has to like it has to be. alive, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. I
And
mean,
that's also not even to say, like, well, some people might say, well, plants are alive. So then it's kind of like, well, I could also even say that maybe that means that at a certain point in time, maybe you just get returned back to the universe as a whole.
right,
Because then there's belief systems that, like, for instance, like plants and trees that are all rooted and connected and stuff like that, that is essentially a sign of the reason that they're intelligent and stuff like that is because that's literally the intelligence from the universe. Like, it's a sign that, like, there is a higher power that connects everything.
right.
So you could even say that maybe there's a way that, like, you basically for a period of time get returned back to the universe.
Right.
I don't know.
Going back to animals, I'm going to use the word certain. I am certain that I've had the same dog twice. The
Really?
Charles, who I have right now, is my first Boston. It's Piggy. It is absolutely Piggy come back to me. When
Really?
I first started to make that connection, I would say the word Piggy and he would just look at me. His eyes would get huge. He'd turn his head. I would go to show someone a video on my phone of Charles, and a video of Piggy from years ago would start playing instead. It was just
Wow.
one thing after another. I am convinced that Piggy came back to me. And of all the animals I've lost, Piggy gutted me. I mean, I was destroyed when I lost that
Right.
dog. So I think that's a part of why he came back to me.
Right. Oh wow. That's interesting. I've That's an interesting thread to pull on. That's cool.
Right.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't know if there's anything else that I really need to dive into today.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to leave it for tonight, knowing that there's other layers that can
Right.
unfold for an entirely different episode later on.
I agree. I At this point I really just want to see if there's anybody that has a comment or a question about this topic that we can dive into the next time that we talk about this. I mean, if people like this episode and they want to know more, we can dive down it again next week. So that's kind of up to everybody that wants to comment or have questions about it. But I agree. I think we're at a good stopping point for today in the sense of I
Right.
feel like we've talked about what we need to say for now. Again, this isn't the last time we're going to talk about it because this is a topic that could there's so many different avenues and theories that we could sit here and talk about it all day, but we don't have time to do that necessarily.
Right.
But I agree. I really just want to see what other people have to say about it, comment about it. Just let us know in the comments, like, what do you want to know about? Do you have any questions that maybe we can research into? We could just sit here and talk about the idea of it. Just let us know.
Absolutely. Or even if you've had an experience uncovering your own past lives and you're willing to share something about it in the comments, I'd love to
Oh,
hear what your experience is.
absolutely. I feel the same way. I feel the same way, 100%. But I feel like that is going to conclude today's episode. I hope you guys liked the past lives and reincarnation topic that we talked about today. I can't wait to dive down it again at a future point. And I also just want to throw out there, too, that I know we got a comment here recently about somebody being really excited about the OSR Part 2. And that's going to be coming here very shortly. So stay tuned, but you're not going to have to stay tuned that long. It's going to be coming out here very soon. So I'm excited for you guys to see that.
All right, everybody. Have a good night, and we'll see you next time.
All right, guys. Have a good night.